Hi, I'm Rod Peppiatt from the Avenue Uniting Church in Blackburn, Victoria, meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation. Welcome. Today, I'm thinking a little bit about the fact that coming up is the Christian date, or date in the Christian calendar known as All Saints' Day. I'll talk a little bit about that in just a few moments. But first I want to read a contemporary reading that we are reading in church today called Kindness. And I've chosen it because what the poem by Rosemary Watola Trommer describes as kindness, I think is also true for faith. I hope that'll become clearer later. Consider the tulip. How long ago someone's hands planted a bulb and gave to this place a living scrap of beauty. How it rises every spring out of the same soil, which is of course not the same soil, but new. Consider the 6 red petals, the yellow at the centre, the soft green rubber of the stem, how it bows to the world. How the longer you sit beside the tulip, it makes you want to bow as well. It is this way with kindness. Someone plants in someone else a bit of beauty, a kind word perhaps, a touch, the gift of their smile or their time. And years later, in that inner soil, that beauty emerges again, pushing aside the dead leaves, insisting on loveliness, a celebration of the one who planted it, the one who perceives it, and the fertile place where it has grown. As I said, I think what is true of kindness is true also of faith. I want to begin with a question. If you were hosting a dinner party for 6 people, living or dead, who would you invite? And what would you cook? Many years ago, the local newspaper in Hobart, where I lived, ran a lifestyle supplement on Saturdays. Perhaps the papers near you did the same thing, or still do even. They included a question and answer feature where local chefs were asked a series of questions, same questions for each chef, and the 2 that I just asked were part of that. If you were hosting a dinner party for 6 people, living or dead, who would you invite and what would you serve? Other questions included things like, well, what's the most embarrassing item in your pantry? And you'd have chefs owning up to 2-minute noodles and things like that. Those dinner party conversations or questions struck me as pretty significant because they invited the chefs to reflect on the people who had influenced in the past, who had helped shape their careers, and or who remained important for them today. And I thought they were great open questions and opening questions that were asked quite creatively. And that's, I think, why I remember them all these years later. Today, I'd like to re-ask the first of those questions with a slight twist. If you were hosting a small dinner party for 6 people, for the people you regard as saints, who would you invite? Now we can come back later to what you might serve them, if you like. Now this might sound like a flippant question, but I actually ask it quite seriously as a way of helping us to think about this. Because this coming Wednesday marks the day known in the Christian calendar as All Saints' Day. Used to be called All Souls' Day, and in some traditions I think it still is. For some it may be known as, thank goodness Halloween is over. Or maybe that's just me. Anyway, I think the name change is a good one because I think it removes us from simply remembering the people who've gone before us in death, as important as that is, to a celebration which includes living saints as well. And for me, this is a good thing. Not only does it give us an opportunity to remember living saints, but it broadens our understanding of who the saints are. I don't know about you, but I don't have any particular connection to any of the saints formally acknowledged by the church through history. As an aside, I did have a bit of an interest in St. Christopher some years ago when he was regarded as the patron saint of safe travel. It was kind of an insurance policy for young Christian men who drove way too fast. And I have to say, I was a little sad when I discovered years later that he'd been stripped of his title. But I do have a deep connection with a number of saints who have been part of my pilgrimage in life and faith. Some who've been present in my particular story, others who have been figures on the wider stages of life, who have influenced me from afar. And I like the fact that this day reminds me of them, and that it creates a space within the rhythm of church life for us to remember together. When you think about it, All Saints' Day is a practice of gratitude, a practice of remembering and giving thanks for the people who have inspired us in faith. So I wonder, friends, who are the saints for us, the ones with whom we'd like to share our dinner? And what makes them so? Perhaps like me, your saints include people like Sunday school teachers or family members, or wise people of all ages who've been part of your history. Perhaps they might include a writer, a poet, an artist, a musician who's changed your life in some way, or someone there with the right work or deed at the right time. Perhaps your saints might be like the psalmists, whose songs we read and remember in church. Singers and communities whose honesty and integrity in dark moments invite us to be honest with God when life is tough for us. Whose faith help us to remember the blessings when they come our way as well. Or perhaps they might be among the people that Jesus names in Matthew's Gospel as blessed in Matthew 5, the Beatitudes. People who are poor, people who make peace, people who are persecuted for doing right. The list goes on. Perhaps they're the people that get described as the salt of the earth. Now I'm aware this is a departure in thinking about saints from the way in which they've come to be understood in the life and history of the church, particularly in the Roman Catholic tradition. But it's actually quite close to the understanding of the very early Christian community, as we can see in one of my favourite passages of the Apostle Paul in Ephesians 4, where he talks about equipping the saints for the work of ministry. His understanding there that has shaped me and my understanding is that all who follow the way of faith, the way of Jesus, are to be seen as the saints, and that the role of the church is to help the saints flourish in their ministry within the world. Now, I don't there mean when I mentioned the way of Jesus, for Paul that was certainly true. I would open my understanding of living and dead saints to include people of other faiths and traditions as well. But Paul, like Jesus and the psalmists, understood that the saints are real people with real strengths and real frailties and with real purpose. As it says in the hymn, our faithful forebears searching went, living in the truth of God, and in our day we take our turn. Perhaps one day future generations might regard us as some of their saints, looking back on how we've helped their faith to flourish. It'd be good, wouldn't it? And that speaks for me to our purpose and calling as church, to live and practice faith that enables our lives and gifts to show the way of Christ. I talked about All Saints' Day being a day of gratitude, a practice of gratitude, in fact. And I'd like to leave us with that space. Take a few moments to think about the people who might be on your saintly guest list. And think also about what you would say to them if they asked you, "Why have you invited me?" I'll leave that with you. In the name of the Holy Presence, in whom we live and move and have our being. Amen. Blessings.